Okay, moving on. This is the E-Truck team, and also thank you for attending. And we would love if you guys could introduce yourselves in the chat. You could put your name, your organization, just so we know that you have your presence here. And moving on. Thank you to all of our organizations. We have all of these. I'm not going to read them off, but thank you guys for being here.
Hey Gia, I'm just gonna
Mhm.
jump in. This is Yasna Tomic with a laryngitis, so I sound different. We also just want to encourage folks to come on camera if you can, because it just helps in the interaction. So all of those that can get on camera, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Yasna. And I will go over our agenda for today. So, starting off, we'll have a project overview from Watson, and then we'll look at the demonstration sites and MCS industry updates with Ken. We'll look at data collection. We're going to have Liz present on the California medium and heavy duty charging corridor framework, and then we will go over to eTruck Phase 2 with Watson. So yeah, just a reminder, please be on camera. Please introduce yourselves in the chat, and I will pass it over to Watson to get started.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate this. And again, I always say I feel lucky to have a great group on the TAC participate because you all are important folks in the industry and we always get great feedback and discussion from this group and I really would encourage like I don't mind people just stepping in while I'm presenting slides and asking questions. So I don't mind that at all. If somebody that's a preference style, but if you do want to raise your hand or type a question in chat, please do that. That all is welcome, we are appreciate everybody joining. So the technical advisory committee for the E-Truck group, we're accelerating medium heavy duty electrification. We've got kind of like five areas that's focused on in this project. The one big area was around community engagement and workforce development and Gia actually was a big lead in all those activities. So appreciate the work Gia did with the community engagement and workforce development. So that was a big work stream in this project. The second big work stream was the work we did on fleet needs and technology maturity assessment and the interviews we had with fleets and technology providers and there was a lot of really great reports and good work there. A lot of that is already published in the etruck.org website and so really encourage folks to utilize those resources. Early in mid-year 2025, we launched the high power charging R&D lab at SCE's Pomona's location so what that site's able to do is for high power charging we're able to have the test gear and the utility connection there so that we can very easily test out charging equipment, vehicles, anything of the such, and make sure we're driving towards interoperability and things like that with the work there. And then we have two pilot sites. One's at Travel Centers of America, and the other at MHX. That's our fourth work stream. And then what we're going to talk quite a bit about today is around this the plan for public corridor charging network, and so that's that fifth work stream. So we'll have Liz is going to talk quite a bit about that. And just so you know who's on the team, Ken Lim, he was mentioned on that first slide. He led a lot of the work on the part three and part four of this project. Liz is leading a lot of work on part five, and it was a joint effort of a lot of folks on the part too. So really appreciate the internal leads we had on this project and also the collaboration we had with folks on all these activities because a lot of these had a lot of outreach and we did get a lot of participation and comment from that. So appreciate that all. Um, I'll go to the next slide there. If there's any questions. I think that's you, Ken.
Thanks, Watson. All right, so there's a lot of exciting updates for the two pilot sites that Watson was mentioning. I know on previous TAC meetings, we've talked a lot about sort of the base of the design, engineering, scheduling plans, but now we're at this part where there's been substantial construction. Go live dates are approaching for both of these sites. So just to zoom out and give a quick reminder of the two sites, they're both based in Southern California. The Travel Centers of America site is going to be operated by BP Pulse. That's going to be a fully public site, 4 CCS chargers and 2 Tesla MCS2 version 2.0 chargers, which is the earlier semi chargers that were released. So at this time, that site has already been energized by SCE last month. And the forecasted commissioning and go live date is the end of Q1 2026. The other site, which is MHX Carson, is what we're calling a quasi-public site. It's going to serve MHX's fleet of 10 Kenworth T680 electric heavy-duty vehicles, as well as a handful of what we'll call vehicles that have the ability to reserve the chargers when they're not in use by MHX. So that site's going to have 4 350 kilowatt CCS chargers. And then in terms of construction, that one's actively under construction right now with a forecasted commissioning as well, end of Q1 2026. And if we go to the next slide.
Hey, Ken.
Yes.
I just typed a question in chat. Will there be like a grand opening or any big events associated with these sites opening?
Yes, I will say, I think a lot of the focus right now has been trying to get these through the finish line, but that is a great point that there will be ribbon cuttings expected at both sides with more details to come on that one. But at this time, Watson, we don't have a specific date as of yet. Just some pictures to show of progress here. The top left one is an early render, so please don't get that one confused. We haven't had a drone fly out there yet to take some overall site photos. But we can see some of the chargers installations. We got the BP Pulse chargers, the 4 lanes on the top right photo, as long as with the Tesla semi chargers for the TA Travel Center location, and then on the bottom left there, MHX site, which is still under construction. Again, this is just kind of a sort of a specific viewpoint, since it's still an active warehouse of just the power cabinets and the dispensers. We'll take photos of it as we progress, if we can get some better either aerial views or overall site pictures as well.
Hey, Ken, there was a question of pull-through
Yes.
capability.
That's right. Yeah, they all have pull-through capabilities. So the way they're constructed right now, as you can see, these 6 lanes on the TA site, the dispensers are allow for the pull-through capability, and then for the MHX site as well. You can't see the dispensers on these photos, but the short answer is yes.
And Ken, could you talk a little bit about where they located the dispensers vis-a-vis their yard and why they decided to put them where they did? Instead of off at the side of the yard, they kind of put it.
Yeah, so I wish I had prepared better photos of the site plan
Okay.
for what you're describing, but I guess to verbally describe it at the MHX site, the dispensers are specifically located where the vehicles load and unload. So the idea with the MHX depot is that it's to sort of lean on opportunity charging. So because they're primarily, drayage operations, they do shorter trips. The idea is as these trucks return back to the depot for like a half hour as they load and unload, they can plug in the vehicles, increase the state of charge on the vehicles, and then go back out to do their next trip. So if you can imagine a large warehouse, the dispensers are kind of split into almost four quadrants uh, of that yard, so that the four vehicles, as they're being loaded and unloaded, they can take advantage of opportunity charging.
Yeah, it's interesting because they didn't want to have to make a separate stop to charge the vehicles.
Exactly.
They kind of wanted to like have, when the vehicles stop, they wanted it to load, unload, and refuel at the same time instead of it having a separate.
So you have charging at each dock, like
Not at
warehouse?
each dock,
Oh,
not at each
not,
dock.
I mean, not each one,
Yeah,
but you have it at select docks.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're not really docks. These are because this is an outdoor yard where they're doing this, right?
That's not exactly a dock. It's just
Yeah,
based on how they place, the equipment that they load into their vehicles. There are certain lanes where the trucks will
yeah,
pull in when they come into the property.
yeah,
And based on those locations, that's where they strategically located the charging dispensers.
yeah. Because it's like a container yard.
Exactly.
So,
Great. Any other questions on the sites? All right. Well, that's all. I'll pass it back to you.
perfect. So a lot of the focus on the e-truck project was about high power charging and the use of MCS as the candidate technology for this, and so. Um, Progress continues to be made on that. We see, the Tesla semis will be coming out in 2026 with the MCS deployment. We see a lot of activity with the equipment suppliers, the charging equipment folks from Watt EV, Kemp Power, and others to utilize that, and so they're, in the U.S. they're a little bit ahead on than the vehicle guys with their developments, and I believe Ted's on the call here, so he can we might have grabbed some of his slides here or images, so Ted, feel free to jump in. And we also are seeing a lot of activity in Europe on the truck side of things, beyond just Tesla. We see activity with Volvo, Daimler, and Kalmar, and Traton, with on the vehicle side, and so the standards are progressing also in the U.S. and I believe this Energize MCS funding lane, that funding opportunity that's the CEC's funded, and I think CalSTART is the administrator for it. Um, there's an opportunity there for funding of MCS, and that thing closes at the end of 2026. But Ted, you're on the call here. You're deep in the trenches on the MCS activities and the standard development front there, and is there any comments you want to make on what's going on with the U.S. standards development and the market activity there?
Yeah, so I just sent some updates to the SAE committee just about how things have been renamed. So just to be clear, ERE is gone, but now CMEI is the Critical Materials Energy Innovation is the new name. Again, you just have to have a map, old name, new
Okay.
Coke, right?
Okay.
And so VTO isn't gone. It's been renamed as Office of Transportation Technologies. In there, they're hoping to reboot some of the ChargeX initiatives on supporting reliability, validation, and codes and standards development. So just to be clear, John Hell and I talked a few minutes ago. All the people I delegated to work on this bailed. And so the document is unfinished. The concepts of a plan. The bullets are done, but the boilerplate is not. So TS 63379 is the connector standard. I'm doing mechanical interoperability testing. So I have a 4x4 matrix, 4 inlets and 4 connectors. I'll be doing that. That's a very big deal, a really big deal, to make sure that we have some of them. There are 15 manufacturers. I believe I'll get samples from Tesla and others as well. So if I can just get at least half of them, that's a majority, right? So if I have half the inlets and half the connectors, I would say I don't know all of them, but I know of the half of the market samples I have in hand, they all pass. And so I'm doing a 3D light scan of the actual hard tool products, and then I'm comparing it against the step files from the standard, and that there I get my tolerance measurements on the inlet, and then from that we do the round robin comparing mechanical engagement and function of the locking pin, and just again check the boxes. So that's the risk thing that John and I talked about a few minutes ago. Is there any risk on deploying stuff that hasn't been checked? Well, someone should check it. That's me. So as far as like go, no go, everyone's been sitting on their hands for about a year. I don't think that I'm going to see that change in the US. And then, of course, in Europe, there's $3 billion of other stuff. And, Mercedes just did the 2,400 kilometer, field trials of running their semis up and down the corridor between Germany and Netherlands and Denmark using the public MCS charging stations. So it's not like coming soon. They're just using the stuff that's already there. So in the US, there's a map, and there's about 5 MCS stations. And again, possibly within your stuff, whoever's ready to go next. But no one's rushing because there's no, where's the beef? So there's nobody putting real money onto it, but they're getting ready for it. And then just to be aware, the eVTOL stuff with the Olympics and other stuff, that might be another thing where people start to say, well, look, you got billions of dollars shoved into these eVTOLs. Wouldn't it be great if you guys built infrastructure? Beta has 100 sites that are under construction or already done, but those are all with CCS cable reels. But they can just as well update those to add MCS cable reels as well. But as far as like who would push this forward, Tesla's going to push it ahead with, as the joke goes, dozens of trucks. But nobody's going thousands of MCS trucks. So anyway, so as far as risk benefit, very little risk, and especially on the electronics, most of these are dual output EVSEs today, where they have a CCS cord that runs at 500 amps, and they'll have a MCS cord that runs at a 500 amps, and then of course with more money up to 1500 or 3000 amps. Thanks for letting me talk, Watson.
No, that's great. Hey, Ted, do you mind repeating? You started out too fast for me with the nomenclature change for
OTT. Yes, exactly. I have to speak slowly so people say, "Let me get this on my sticky note on my monitor."
Okay.
ERE is now CMEI. Some people call it CME. So critical materials and energy innovation. That's the new name that doesn't say renewable, right? So you just have to say, what they cross off? Well, renewables, right?
Okay.
Vehicle Technology Office, right? They're crossing off the vehicle part. They said transportation. So the new name is Office of Transportation Technology.
Okay.
Perfect. Vehicles bad, transportation good. Like it's the same thing. It's like, no. New administration, new name, new code.
Right. Very good. CMEI. That one doesn't roll off the tongue.
Well, some people call it CME. So again, it's again, people didn't ask for it. They were just told, here's your new name.
Okay.
So Lee Slazek is gone, but Mike Weissmiller and Fernando have taken over for Lee stuff. They work for Austin Brown, and they're in CMEI. And now I just found out today that the money that Congress, so the reason is that Congress put stuff in that's VTO projects. They said, but VTO doesn't exist. Well, you better make something that's equivalent. So that's what happened was the funding that they cut on Doge got put back. And because there's things that were specific line items to vehicle technology, they say, now what? I said, well, we'll call it transportation technology. Clearly much better.
Okay.
So this is all about just the same pile of money. Again, same quantity of money. They just have to shove it a different place and not upset anybody, offend them by calling it a vehicle or clean energy, right? Just take out the clean and renewable and vehicle, and then you can spend the money.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
And Ted, do you see any difference since the European MCS stuff is a little bit, I don't want to say more mature, but progressing.
It's the same companies, but they have real sales. So again, the salespeople here are like the car dealership where there's just, tumbleweeds rolling down the car lot. Like nobody's selling anything here. But in
Okay.
Europe, they got the pump is primed. Like all these corridors are being built out, all the truck manufacturers shipping trucks.
Okay. But do you see any convergence of the standards? Like, will we be using the what does Europe use for their standards? The not SAE, they use
The IEC and ISO are the
yeah.
same. So for us, 3271 should be done and it should be published. But all the people who I paid to work on this all bailed, and I can't do this myself. And that's kind of what it's coming down to. Is like, well, then we'll just wait. And for the document, like I said, and I hate to use the concepts of a plan. All the bones are there, the
Okay.
skeleton's there, but not the flesh. And you're like, well, details matter. Who's going to do the rest of the details? And of course, everyone looks at me and is like, well, you will certainly. And it's like, in my sleep, when, so it'll get done, just not nowhere near the timeline we had before. But again, this glimmer of hope that Jacob Matthews and other joint office people seems like they have, this kind of stuff to say, look, don't count on industry finishing any of this. It's all got to be government support's going to be needed. So hopefully those people can put money in the right place. And I can, again, if I can contract to a professional editor just to say, here's the messy thing, help me make this a professional document.
Okay.
But like I said, the guy I hired from Marquette, zero. He said, I'm not writing anything. And so I'm like, well, okay, I guess I'm on my own again. So just to be clear on why it's not, you look and say, you've been working on this for years. Why is it not done? It's like, well, I'm working on a loan. Again, building a skyscraper with one trowel takes a long time.
Well, appreciate you carrying the torch there, Ted.
Yeah, again,
Thank
it'll
you.
get done. Just when is another question. So
Thanks, Ted.
But I have very low fear of failure, that there's no boogeyman out there. And like I said, the mechanical interoperability would be a really good one to get behind us. Communication interoperability on twisted pair and shielding and grounding, also another noise. I'm very worried about noise. But, like I said, trust but verify, right? I trust it's designed well, but it'd be great if we'd actually run these things and measure it.
Good. And is there any help you need, Ted, on this effort? Or
No, see, this is where Paul Stith and you and Rustam and others just keeping the word going, like on all these conferences, to say, fear not, right? Okay. We're on first steps of a longer journey, almost like the pioneers cutting down or breaking trail. You guys are trailblazers. Keep doing that.
Okay. Great. Good.
Because others can follow in your wagon tracks, right? I mean, it's just they just get to do what you did, right? That's second person through has got a lot easier.
Perfect. Good. Thanks, Ted. We can move to next slide so we make sure we leave time for other questions there. I'm going to transition now to the pilot sites, and now that like Ken showed some exciting news that we're really the precipice of having these sites starting to collect data and pretty exciting there. We did want to share some of the work we're doing with data collection there, and we can go to the next slide there. And so we have a plan to collect data and what we're trying to do with it, and the discussion I really want to tee up today is besides the expected data that we're collecting. Once we have this information, there's other questions we can answer if people like raise their hand and say, "Hey, can you answer this too?" And we can just integrate it into the deliverables that we're already planning, and hopefully it doesn't involve too much extra work there. But that's what we're really trying to do here at this point. We wanted to share with you what we're expecting to collect. And then also, and some of the questions we're expecting to answer, but also tee up a discussion of what could be done from a couple different perspectives if there's interest in folks. So when we look at the data we're going to collect, I apologize. This is a really text-heavy slide there, and I struggled to shorten it up and lose the richness of it. There really is two tranches of data that we're collecting. The first tranche of data is around that top bullet, the 12 months of data for utilization metrics, charging profiles, the site costs, the customer feedback, those kind of things. And then the second tranche of data is really with these next grouping of bullet points around DER and VGI strategies, and how do they impact the utility connections, the energy costs for the sites. Does it impact the flexibility and performance of the trucks? So again, what a lot of those other deliverables were expected to answer, that second tranche is a lot heavy around DERs, VGIs, and managed charging and things like that. So that's how this data breaks down. And apologize for the messy slide there. But any questions before I move on to next part of this on what we're trying to collect? All right. So we're going to have three different perspectives on the next slide, and we'll start with the perspective of site hosts. And when we put put the site host hat on, and what kind of things that they might want to start understanding. We're just kind of putting out some ideas that, like, what kind of data they need to support their decisions on. They're going to have to be figured out their charging mix. Are they putting in 350 kW chargers, megawatt level chargers? What's the timing and mix of those, and how do they price this, and how do they deal with vehicles in the lane, but maybe not taking full power, this idle policy, because they're always going to want to be, keeping the throughput going at these sites. How do they think about DER, VGI investments, layout and amenity investments? So we contemplated that those were some of the things that they're going to need data and to support on. And so on the next slide, what I tried to capture was what are some of these questions that they have, and how does our current work plan that was identified in our funding to support, how's that line up with some of these kind of questions that folks could have? And so I think our data will be pretty good at understanding site throughput, utilization, and what kind of revenue potential there is there. I think we'll be really pretty good there, and understanding like what the throughput is in a day, what that looks like. I think we'll be pretty good at understanding, what kind of fleets, take advantage of the charging. I think we'll start having, especially the travel centers of America site will have a mix of different chargers. And so we're actually going to start getting some information on, how this charger mix works, and what's the utilization patterns, and is there differences there? The utility cost management, demand charges. I think we'll have a lot of good information there, and the impact on on-site storage and energy management. So I think we'll have some pretty good information there. Is there any other things that, like from a site host perspective, that we should start thinking about that would help folks from the site host to evaluate, how do you plan, manage, and operate a, medium heavy duty charging infrastructure? And what kind of analysis or information we need to get out into the marketplace?
Is there a way to, in any of these, to integrate that perhaps potential uncertainty with just electric electricity pricing coming from the grid, you know, as, moving forward in, because, PG&E is like always going to PUC for general rate cases, to increase rates, for the myriad of reasons. And I'm just curious because that will, a capital decision that's made based on a power pricing structure
Oh,
today could really be affected if that changes tomorrow, and it could really shift, the ROI and the economics of it.
yeah, no, I think you're, yeah, that's a great comment. And, and, and for folks, um, Lisa, you provided a whole ton of comments, right, on our plan, right?
Yeah. I don't know
So
if
did I. I think was she talking to me or
Oh,
Lisa?
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry.
and Leslie, yeah.
Yeah, Leslie, sorry.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Leslie. Oh my gosh, you were right on with so many of your comments. Really appreciate that. I just wanted to acknowledge that for everybody because, man, Leslie is like if you have questions, she's really on top of this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so, so Leslie, about that, like, how do we take that uncertainty of future utility costs is essentially like your kind of question, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder, I guess your question, what it's making me think is like, do we have to have some scenarios in our analysis?
Every single paper I read or study, that's the first thing I think of is providing some kind of a sensitivity analysis
Yeah.
on certain factors that have less certainty, just knowing what we know and knowing
Okay.
what we've been observing over the years. And I always think fuel price is going to be the thing that's going to, provide the uncertainty. That because in a sense it's important to, as part of that planning process, but also, you know, important in a more longer term as these sites hosts and the developers are working with utilities on, how they might have their rate structures change. That kind of information is going to be super important for them because ultimately a utility investment in one of these massive sites, um, is a big investment, and they don't want to see it go sour either. They want to make sure that electrons are flowing and they're getting cost recovery through delivering more power. So, yeah, I just think that having the ability to scenario on pricing, on electricity pricing, is actually beneficial. And I'm sorry if I didn't chime in with this one earlier.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Anybody else have like comments from a site host perspective and decisions that they may be facing, what they might need?
Watson, this is Mary Brazel with the Oregon Department of Transportation.
Hey, Mary.
And I'm just curious, sort of the charger mix, the use case, and the amount of real estate that you need, for different types of use cases here. I think that might be something that, you know, and you talked about the amenities, but I think just how much real estate you have to have and and what you need to offer there. There are a variety of different models now out there with some folks offering, meeting rooms and,
Yeah.
places for you to hold conferences and training sessions to teach, people how to work on the trucks or whatever. I mean, I'm not sure what you can do, but I think understanding the full range of um, what's going to make a site attractive, what's going to make a site useful, and for what applications is something that would be really, certainly as somebody who's going to fund some of these things, that would be really interesting to me. But I think if I was going to invest in them, that would also be very interesting to me to see what you can look into and what kind of feedback you can get or what kind of trade-offs people are making.
Yeah, no, yeah, because the existing travel plazas, for the trucks, they have a lot of those amenities because the drivers have the required minimum, the OSHA have required downtimes and things like that, and so they're providing services during those downtimes. But if some of these sites aren't really there for that purpose. Do you need all those? Is that the kind of the question you're asking? Does the drayage site need all those amenities that a
Well,
long haul?
it's it's kind of a combination. What
Yeah.
is important? Um, so if you've already got a Travel Center of America site that's, all set up already, that's great. But if you were going to fund a freestanding one, it, you know, how many of those amenities need to be replicated? All of them or just some of them? And
Good
does it
questions.
matter if you're doing, drayage or if you're doing regional delivery versus overnight? You know.
Perfect. Thanks.
Eh,
Yasa, do you want to comment
Yeah,
on
well,
it?
I see Tim
Okay.
from the Port of Oakland has his hand up as
Yeah, I
well.
was
Go
just
ahead,
gonna.
Tim.
Thanks, Kay. Good morning, everyone. I was just gonna add to this economics discussion. Yeah, I think um, just to add to that, I mean, this is where I think someone like a Travel Center of America, where along the freight corridor you have these amenities, you're actually most likely in a not very populated area, being right next to the freeways and whatnot, and that's where the economics are different from, say, a location near at the port. Just based on my experience, there's a reason why there are no gas stations at the port within port property because real estate is expensive. And if you're going to invest in a site like that, your baseline costs for that land are a lot pricier, and that's going to be passed on to the end user, whether it be a gas station or a charging station in this case. And so I think that's where you really need to at least mention in these reports the economics behind it, always comparing it to maybe the diesel counterparts. Hey, say yes, electrical prices, utility prices are going up, but here's the rate for, say, a diesel price. So you have some comparisons. You're able to make those decisions and plan ahead because gasoline prices are also going up. So anyway, those are just some initial thoughts when we're talking about the what's valuable to, say, someone who's actually considering this planning process in a public environment, I guess.
And do you think we need to publish, as we publish the work on our data collection here, do you think there's any, special, um, um, I don't want to say summary papers or executive summaries or fact sheets or things like that we should target for site hosts or any audience like that? Should that be a focus of ours of making sure that we have fact sheets or information that's really tailored for them,
I
or are we really just trying to
I
answer the policy questions?
I think it behooves you to stay very high level because there's going to be situations where if you think about it from the other side, the public charging stations are one aspect of it, and there's going to be critical along the trade corridors. But if I, as a trucking company, have a fleet of high value assets 50 trucks, 100 trucks, whatever else it may be, I'm going to try to develop that charging infrastructure on my facility because that way I can keep an eye on these trucks. Also are high investment. So it's going to be a different scenario, and I don't think it would be beneficial to try to sort of game plan for each and every one. It's going to be a unique business case for each, and just keeping it at a high level policy level would probably be the most valuable at this time, at least, until things mature and people have a better understanding of it.
Good.
And that's why we, and pardon my voice, um, that's why we have these two pilot sites that are actually different, right? The Travel Centers of America is the more sort of gas, um, the model of a gas station, open, fully kind of public, versus the MHX site that is closer to the port, is more of that type, Tim, that you were just referring to on my own property for mostly the trucks that are coming. So we're looking forward to seeing the differences between those two. That's one comment. The other, I would say, we do have a fairly large group of charging providers that we can definitely validate this with. And especially in Southern California, they've been building out or are in the process of building out the sites. So we can verify some of these premises or information that we think is important.
That's good. Good. I'm gonna, for the sake of time, I'm gonna step into the next slide there. But I don't want to stop this discussion here. But when we were thinking about putting the perspective of utilities, they're really trying to figure out, the feeders and substation upgrades, the resource adequacy, do they have to figure out non-wires alternatives, tariffs, and their hosting capacity fairness there, or hosting capacity accuracy, excuse me. So in the next slide, I took that a level deeper and did the same thing of like where do we think we're this data collection that we're going to do at these sites. It's going to help us with understanding load shapes and coincidence and how's it that the site peak align with the system peaks. We're gonna, better understand non-wire alternatives and DER sizing that could help utilities. And also, the approaches for managed charging, how effective it is, and demand flexibility for these truck charging sites. What like for the economists in the world, is that a inelastic or elastic kind of demand for these kind of sites, based on for the driver. So we're going to start getting a little bit of information there. But is there anything else that's really important that we should be thinking about from the utility perspective? With the site data we're collecting from the charging sessions and such.
I would just say that from the as you get the load profiles and the charging profiles, you're going to find that they're very much different from the actual charging specs of the charger itself.
Yeah.
That MCS charger, although it is capable of handling a megawatt charging system, you're going to find that that megawatt charging is very limited, right? Maybe only for the first hour, for half an hour, whatever that charging cycle looks like, and it drops off pretty precipitously. As such, you're going to find that you're over engineering a lot of these assets. So I think that data, knowing what the true charging profiles look like, you're then able to better engineer what a substation needs to really have in terms of capacity. The peaks are great, but the peaks aren't happening all the time. In fact, very little of the time. So I think those are the things on the engineering side which will it'll help inform how these locations develop in the future.
Great point there. Hey, John, and John also is another one that's given us a lot of great comments on our work here. So, hey, John.
Yeah, hey everybody, John McElhenney, EPA here. Thanks again for hosting this meeting and for all the work you guys are doing to support this program and the project. Just affirming everything Tim just said, I think those were excellent points, and certainly he's learned from some sites on his facility already. And just for the sake of the group, remind me again for these two particular pilot sites, how were they selected and what criteria went into their selection, particularly from a utility perspective? Were they on a distribution circuit that just had sufficient excess capacity and we had an amenable site host, therefore, the pathway to implementation was smoother than if there was a willing site host but not excess capacity, that formula is a little bit different. So that's a really important screening criterion in terms of not only do you have land acquisition taken care of, you have somebody willing to host the site, be a champion for developing the site for this purpose, but also you need to have distribution capacity to be able to service the peak load potentially at the site. So that's not always one and the same. It's certainly in the projects I've helped to deploy, not always been as smooth. And oftentimes we're waiting for a long while before the utility can deliver the capacity, and it leads to a lot of suboptimal outcomes in terms of on-site generation and the like. So I'm curious as to how Travel Centers of America and BP Pulse selected the Ontario site and how MHX selected theirs, and if they have had to make additional distribution investments, kind of what the arc of that decision-making process was, because that to me is one of the key bottlenecks in delivering this technology at scale. Where we need it from an operations perspective may not necessarily be conducive to where the grid can deliver it. So just wanted to tease some knowledge out of you guys on that sense.
Oh, sure. And I want to get to Emily's question too. Quickly, as with a lot of government opportunities, you have to kind of have the site host locked down, during the proposal stage and during contracting. So both of those sites were selected during our proposal development stage, and based on our early assessment during the proposal stage, we thought that those sites looked okay from a hosting capacity perspective. So we did check that stuff before, but it was more of it wasn't the official capacity check that you would do with the utility. It was just more of our desktop study kind of stuff that we could do ourselves to verify. So that was kind of helped out a lot there with us. That again, we did a little bit of pre-screening. The other thing I want to mention though is we're actually going to be publishing some really useful and the heat map work that Liz will be talking about later. We're going to be posting some really kind of more useful, easier to use ways to think about hosting capacity I really do want to point to just wet your whistle that we've got some work there that's going to help with that that those quicker assessments and this early stage feasibility work that I think are going to be really useful. So hey Emily, thanks for joining.
Yeah, great to see you all. I think this is more of a comment than a question, but I think you've highlighted a lot of really critical factors here that'll be great to have, some empirical data on. I think, to the extent that it might be feasible, I'd be really interested in, if there's ability to get at some more qualitative data as well around kind of this demand flexibility piece. I think certainly the factors you've highlighted there are really critical, but I think just understanding, how fleet duty cycles or how fleets may be kind of modifying or not modifying their operations to align with some of the utility peak periods will be really helpful. So Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
you've highlighted a lot of really critical things here.
Oh, great. Hey, Yasin or Ken, and as far as this qualitative data, any comments you wanted to add to that, or?
Yeah, no, we are. Um, yeah, thanks, Emily, for the question. While we in the industry wants all the quantitative stuff, we are looking to gather and looking at ways we will gather some of the input on the qualitative. How did it work for the users? What were their barriers? How much did it extend their um, mileage that day? Satisfaction, dissatisfaction from the user side, the vehicle side, but also then, to find out what issues existed on the site, etc. So yes, and we're trying to figure out the most critical, important questions, and then how to get those surveys completed.
Good. And then probably Lisa's probably going to kill me for running long on this section here, but it's great dialogue there. We want to move to the policy perspective, and there's a lot of things the policymakers and folks need. The emissions accounting, the infrastructure, smarter infrastructure investment. How do you um, support a stronger grid and freight coordination there. I'm gonna, I won't read through the stuff on this next slide there, but anything from on the policy side that would be really helpful that we should be trying to support with our work here that hasn't been already kind of like described of what we're planning to do. Any big policy questions that are out there? I have a slide set up for you, Emily, later to, to talk about some policy questions, or some policy, regulatory activities there. But hey, John.
I see Mary popped on screen. Mary, go ahead.
Okay, I'm real quick this time. Sorry. I'm not so quick on finding my hand raising. Um, uh, you've got market adoption and technology transition signals and infrastructure effectiveness and public investment accountability. So, but here's the here's the thing is that we know in light duty, not great quantitative studies that have proven this, but general rule of thumb is public charging infrastructure, and I'm looking mostly from the public charging perspective, not so much the depot. Um, but for the public charging, you need to have the charging out there for light duty for 1 or 2 years before people start taking it up in great numbers. People need to see that it's out there. They need to believe that the charging infrastructure is there before they start to make investments in electric vehicles that they can comfortably and reliably feel like they can find a public charger. My sense is that's a little different in medium and heavy duty, but there's got to be some of that as well. So I think we need to be careful in analyzing sort of utilization and public investment accountability and technology transition, whatever it is. There needs to be some way to try and quantify this effect of how much charging infrastructure has to be out there before there's enough confidence on the part of fleets to transition more to electric and know that they'll be able to use a public charging um, pathway. So I think that's really important. We say the other all the time, and I think there's a few little studies here or there that people have tried to point to, but you know, it's really easy to say, we built it and nobody came. And I want us to frame the questions differently. What
Okay.
does it take? What level of density? What level of reliability? What level of availability is needed in order to change the behavior of fleets to comfortably rely on public charging.
Yeah, I guess your point is like there's a minimum threshold, and we may not have even hit that minimum threshold yet, right? Even
And it may also be something that you can gather as part of your
yeah,
data analysis,
yeah,
but from users in some way, shape, or form. What more do you need? What
yeah.
would you electrify more if there were, whatever. I'm not exactly sure how one researches that, but I think,
Mary, I was gonna jump in. Just, I
yeah.
think you're hitting on something we're seeing, and from my recent work, or our recent work rather, uh, we're seeing that we need to make these happen hand in hand. We actually cannot just build and then wait to see how fleets feel comfortable, because the investment is pretty large and it's not going to happen just on its own. So we're finding that we actually need to roll out hand in hand much closer the vehicle and the charging. So I'll leave it there. Happy to reconnect on this, but good, good question. Flagging something important.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I think it's just important to say you don't want to infer from a limited sample size of two sites, the feasibility of market-wide or region-wide deployment of this type of technology. I think to the extent you can frame the findings as, technical and pilot in nature, and then perhaps extrapolate what this might mean for, a staged or phased regional approach to a deployment, whether that be corridor-based or fleet-based, based on, a specific subset of fleet partners and desire for regional operations, maybe perhaps some joint specifications to get demand for a similar type of vehicle that multiple fleets can use, and also similar infrastructure that similar fleets can use, like say, for example, fleets that travel between Southern California, Las Vegas, and Phoenix. And that's kind of their route profile, and then building out the necessary volume of trucks and infrastructure to make that viable for, say, like 3 or 4 fleets that operate in that geography, as one example, versus like, oh, we have 2 sites. This is what we've learned, and this is what it means for national deployment of this technology. I think we're very early in that understanding, and it would inevitably lead to some spurious findings. So I think Mary's guidance is well taken in that respect. But that being said, I think there's still a lot we can learn from these sites and the vehicles that will be deployed there. And one of the methodological pieces of advice I would give to you all as you're looking at emissions accounting, which is something I do a lot at EPA for projects like this, is, it's important to understand that infrastructure doesn't reduce emissions, vehicles reduce emissions. And it's really about how much and what type of vehicle is utilizing it versus what the alternative would be. And oftentimes in projects of this nature, we'll use the baseline as a current model year diesel equivalent of whatever vehicle is visiting the project site, and then looking at the utilization of the vehicle itself as the marker for how much delta of emission benefit you would be getting. And obviously the pollutant species that you're going to want to quantify are the 3 that are listed here, but I would also, VOC or hydrocarbon is another one. Certainly NOx and VOC together create tropospheric ozone pollution, so you need both constituents to make smog. So tracking VOC benefits is important. Also, carbon monoxide emissions is another one that you will probably want to report. Yeah, so those are a couple of things. Just setting the baseline at current model year, looking at utilization versus a current model year diesel for, your CO2 benefit, but also for the criteria pollutant benefit. And then just reporting out based on what you're seeing. I imagine most of these are going to be Class 8 tractors, but that may not always be the case. So just wanted to put that out there. As far as large policy questions, I think you can respect that I'm not going to dive into those waters at this point in time on behalf of EPA. But when it comes to methods and sources, I can certainly provide technical advice.
We won't forget that, John. You always come with great ideas, and I always say we need to go ask John. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks.
How are we doing on time?
So yeah, yeah, we can move. So I'm always one that, like, if you understand the questions, the answers, are easier to get towards. And so anyway, feel free to reach out to us if you've got ideas on what the right questions we should be asking are so that we can, or analysis so that we can really support, the industry and your own work and while also fulfilling our requirements and the funding. So again, feel free to reach out with any suggestions on this part. Or as you see, the sites are nearing energization, are uh, not energization, but launching and ribbon cuttings and things like that. That we're starting to get more serious and about what that work is. So thanks for the comments there. I'm going to turn it over to Liz here at this point.
Great, thanks, Watson. Thank you all for participating. So I see Ted Bone's hands up. So just before starting.
Oh, just as you're transitioning on the opportunities, the horizon for more corridor stuff in California, is there any news? Is that going to come up today, or is just asking?
Well, that's a great transition, actually,
okay.
Ted. Because
if that's what you're going to say, I'm sorry, I spoiled your rabbit out of the hat. But anyway.
Not at all. Actually, we've, as you'll see here in this first slide, actually, this is a great place to start. As you see, we have renamed or recommended a rename for the final report, being called California Medium and Heavy Duty Charging Corridor Framework, to better reflect the contents of the report rather than a final deployment plan, which is more of a descriptive plan with specific sites chosen. As you'll see in the slides presented today, we are focused more on corridor priority road segments as recommendations for priority areas rather than actual sites. So perfect transition. All right, let's start then with the project progress related to modeling medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure needs, which has led us to the final stage of completion, which you see here, Q1 2026, California Medium and Heavy Duty Charging Corridor Framework. As you can see, this has been a 2-year endeavor. So starting all the way in 2024, the project team collected feedback from the freight industry as a whole, so from fleets, OEMs, and EVSEs. And the results of this survey work is presented in the Fleet Charging Infrastructure Needs and Technology Maturity Assessment. So that is available on the eShock website, and I think we can also share a link here in the messages for the specific reports. The second stage was then working closely with Cambridge Systematics, SCAG, ICF, along with the EPRI and CalSTAR team on the travel demand model. So really being able to understand freight travel patterns and modeling these as an input then into the heavy load model, which models the charging infrastructure needs for medium and heavy duty trucks in California. And as you can see there, from the Q4 2024 to Q3 2025, there's about a year that we really focused on refining the kind of modeling inputs and outputs of modeling charging infrastructure for freight trucks in California. And the culmination of the 1-year progress can be found, again, now published on the eTruck website as the second iteration of the eTruck heat map. And then all of these modeling results were then kind of taken as the next stage of the project, which is to develop a site prioritization framework in which to then analyze the results of the model. So we kind of worked then on presenting the results in a way that was more of a planning tool, and that is the third iteration of the heat map. So heat map 3.0, which is the link that was shared to this advisory committee in December for advisory committee feedback, and which feeds into the California Medium and Heavy Duty Charging Corridor Framework reports. And as mentioned previously, we have renamed it just to better reflect the contents of the report itself. As you'll see in the next few slides, it really does focus on the kind of priority corridors phased in kind of priority framework approach here, rather than a prescriptive deployment plan. Right, so the main objectives of this charging corridor framework report, as we're calling it now, really was to present the results of the infrastructure needs modeling along with a framework and a methodology to be able to analyze these results, along then with recommendations of priority areas or priority road segments for medium and heavy duty truck infrastructure deployment in California. So the methodology focuses on, first instance, identifying priority corridors. So there's a few sources that we've used there to be able to do so, both on a federal and state level, and then also focused on identifying specific planning layers to then add to the modeling results. So we have, for example, disadvantaged communities and grid capacity data that were added to the modeling results, which then led us to implement the phase-in approach. So this was actually in which CalSTART played a role in developing at a federal level, and also includes kind of a corridor perspective on planning. I'll speak a little bit more about this in the next slide. And so yeah, basically this next stage really focuses on priority road segments rather than kind of areas, and really takes on a corridor prioritization perspective in HEMAP 3.0. And all of these layers of information and kind of methodology and framework to analyze the data then brought us to identify and characterize 4 deployment scenarios, as we're calling them, each focusing on specific layers of information and priority perspectives. So we have utility, market, policy, and equity. And I'll be going into more detail on all 4 of these perspectives in the following slides as well. And so the product of this framework are 2 deliverables. So we have the 3rd iteration of the HEMAP, which presents this projected public truck charging need along statewide transportation corridors using the phase-in corridor approach, and also including equity and grid capacity layers. And then secondly, these results are kind of, the framework is presented and the results are presented in this California MDHT charging corridor framework reports. Right, and if we move on to the next slide. Thanks, Gia. All right, so what we're seeing here are the phased-in approach taken from the phased-in federal corridor plan, again, in kind of conjunction with the work that CalSTART supported on. CalSTART also has their own phased-in approach report, I think, that we can also link here on the messages. Emily, I see your question. So 3.0 is not currently live on the website. So the next steps there are to get final feedback and a confirmation from the CEC before publication. But there is a link that is available as a draft in one of the previous emails that we sent out to the advisory committee. Again, I'm happy to send it out again if needed, Emily. So moving back to the phase-in approach here, I think the main point here to make is that these 3 phases, again taken from the kind of phase-in CalSTART and federal approach, do correspond to the timelines that were used in the modeling efforts as well. So the 3 dates that we've used for modeling are 2027, 2030, and 2035. And as we can see, those correspond to the first 3 phases of the phase-in approach. There are more phases. I think it goes up into 2045, but these are the 3 phases that we will focus on for this e-truck effort, and those that are also included here in the 3rd iteration of the HEMAP. So as we can see represented here in the first instance as blue for phase 1, and those really focus, for example, on 2 major hubs. So we have the Northern California hub around San Francisco and Sacramento, and the Southern California hub there around Los Angeles and San Diego. And so those cover the major ports of California. And then we move on to linking those hubs through corridors, and also starting to think just outside of the statewide approach, but also how do we link to nearby states as well. Which brings us then to phase 3, which really is then taking a nationwide expansion framework, where we're, for example, linking here to Las Vegas, to Oregon, and then further Washington, Arizona as well. And so connecting those ports to inland destinations as well. All right. Great. So yeah, thanks Jasna for, yes, 2.0 is available on the eTruck website. All right, so now moving on to the four perspectives and a little bit more detail onto the methodology of these frameworks. So as a reminder, there is the utility, market, policy, and equity perspective that we'll be covering today. I am mindful of time here, but I think we should definitely have time to cover those four perspectives. All right, so starting from a utility perspective, the prioritization here focuses on grid readiness and minimizing upgrade complexity. So as you can see here, the 2 dates that we're showcasing, so 2030 really emphasizes on sites where 5 megawatt loads can be distributed with minimal infrastructure upgrades. So here we're targeting easier to deploy locations. And then by 2035, we're looking at expanding to sites requiring additional capacity that's not currently available. So here we're including substation level upgrades for pending loads. And this is actually one of the added layers that has been added to HEMAP 3.0 in terms of grid capacity. So here we're looking at specifically pending load data at a substation level. So certain utilities in California do provide this information, one of them being SCE. So where the information is available, we have added it as a layer, a grid capacity layer to HEMAP 3.0, and which has been used to guide kind of the site prioritization or priority areas in the corridor charging framework. So here I'm showing here on the right-hand side an example for priority area based on the criteria of the utility perspective. So here we're looking at 2030, and as you can see by the line represented in green, we're looking at phase 2 then of the phased-in approach in an area between Barstow and Las Vegas. The hexes that you're seeing are representing the grid capacity available currently at those locations. And as you can see with the square that we've highlighted, this particular hex has a maximum capacity of 8.99, so nearly 9 megawatts of grid capacity in this area. So this would be the recommended site for 2030. Emily, I see another question around load ICA maps. I'm wondering if someone from the EPRI side can answer that.
Yeah, that's correct. It's still publicly available maps from SCE PG&E.
Yeah, and just a quick 30 seconds on the ICA maps. We have two new views that are on this heat map 3.0 for the ICA maps. And if you notice, we use hexes. So what we did was we turned the squiggly lines that are on the utility ICA maps and created a geographic boundary and said, what's the maximum capacity available within that boundary, and so we use that to color code those things. So you think about it from a user perspective, it makes it easier now for a user to scan areas to see the color coding of these hexes as opposed to the squiggly lines that are on the ICA maps. And then the second thing that we did is we have this new thing that's this classification based on what's the complexity. I think we call it complexity of interconnection is another capacity layer. And so we have a high, medium, and low there, and based on the capacity levels there, and so that'll also be a quicker way for users to be able to scan these maps and to do that preliminary screening faster than looking at the squiggly lines. Anyway, so sorry for a long explanation there. I know we're short of time, and I did want to leave a little bit of time for the regulatory work at the end here. So sorry about that.
Thanks, Watson. It's worth noting here as well that we've now added an appendix to the charging corridor framework with more information on the sources of this data layer as well. All right, maybe moving on to scenario 2 for the sake of time. Thanks, Gia. All right, so the second scenario here is the market perspective. So the market-driven approach here targets profitable, low-risk sites with strong return on investment. So it prioritizes what we're calling low-hanging fruit. So these are locations that require no major utility upgrades and offer a high utilization potential. So this high utilization potential here, we're measuring through the total energy consumption or energy demand, which is the results of the modeling here, which are represented on those road segments. So this priority perspective also overlaps with the utility perspective in the sense that sites with minimal grid upgrades needed tend to be more attractive, especially in terms of timeline for deployment, that tend to be minimal at those sites as well. And then here we have an example again of a site that has been identified by the project team as meeting the criteria of the market's perspective. So here we are in the area just above north of San Francisco. As we can see, there's an area there with a lot of hexes that are represented in the high yellow color. So high grid capacity available at that site, and also high utilization or high demands for infrastructure in that location, as represented by the road segments. All right, moving on to scenario number 3. Thanks, Gia. All right, so the policy perspective prioritization, this one really ensures that there is network coverage. So it addresses mainly infrastructure gaps. So it focuses on building where charging is most needed, regardless of the profitability and regardless of the grid capacity needed at that site. So this is what we're calling gap sites. So these are sites that are essential for corridor connectivity or freight electrification, but they may require public incentives to attract investment in these areas. So this perspective really does align with the state and federal strategies, including that phased-in federal corridor plan. Right, so they're road segments that have been identified as having a high need for infrastructure, especially for statewide or nationwide plans, but may need a little bit more help there to be able to be built. So the example that we have here on the right-hand side around the Barstow area, so connecting then to different states and specifically to Las Vegas. As we can see, as represented in the hexes, we're seeing a lot of dark blue hexes, meaning that there is minimal grid capacity available around the Barstow area location, even though it is a kind of major freight hub, as we can see here, and a critical location for some of those corridors, such as the I-15 and I-40 there. Emily, I see your hand up.
Yeah, quick question on that one. So how, I guess, are you making a determination about network coverage being needed? Is that based on like a minimal distance between public charging hubs, something else, or just kind of how are you determining?
Yeah, so at this stage, we're looking mostly at road segments in general, and there are no minimal, so it's non-prescriptive at this stage, so it's not a deployment plan per se. So at this stage, we're just kind of presenting a methodology and a framework for internal analysis by kind of users of the map and of the planning tool. So we will not be saying, for example, there needs to be a station in Barstow. We will be saying this road segment is a priority road segment where there is a high need but low grid capacity.
But and Liz, the color of the road segments, the energy consumption, they're coded by the energy consumption on the road segments, and so like Liz said, we chopped them up into segments, but that's the energy consumption. If you look at the the yellow is the highest level, and the dark purple is the lowest level of
Got
energy.
it. Yeah, thank you. I think I'm just maybe not understanding the policy-driven prioritization piece. So are you looking at like the Biden corridors, or like what is that first piece coming from?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so there's a mix there of yes, the federal corridor phase-in approach plan. So we've kind of added that as a layer of information here. So those have been corridors that have been kind of recommended as priority corridors. We also have the California statewide priority corridors that have been added here. I'm trying to remember the number, SB something. And then also what we're seeing here, though, are not those priority corridors. Those are the modeled energy consumption, so modeled charging needs there. Yes, I believe that's the one, Emily, 671.
Are the areas that are shown in those big red lines covered? I keep thinking someone's in Imperial Irrigation District, maybe not here, where you might not have all of the data, but in these lines, do you actually have ICA maps upon which to base those hexagons? Because I know that, like, if you're in San Diego, SDG&E, you don't have any of that data because EPRI hasn't been able to link their ICA maps, to the you know what I'm talking about, the eRoadmap tool. So are there gaps in actual electrical utility data or in this area?
Yeah, yeah. So we don't have data from all the like folks like the Imperial Irrigation District and stuff
Yeah,
such.
yeah, I saw a big
Um,
opening in SMUD territory as well,
yeah,
which I
yeah.
understand. So
Yeah, and what was interesting is that our team has presented this to the utilities a couple weeks ago, and a number of utilities said, "Oh, if this is what you're going to do with it, like we can give you the data. We don't necessarily want to post our hosting capacity maps, but if you're doing it this way." They're a little bit more comfortable. So I'm not saying that addresses everybody's problem, but we might be able to pick up a few more utilities if
right
it's done
on,
this way.
good. I know it's been a challenge for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hey, hey, how
Awesome,
you
awesome.
doing time-wise there, Liz? I do want
Yeah,
to make sure.
exactly. I know we have a phase two section. We just have one last scenario,
Okay.
the equity perspective, and then we can breeze through the last few slides. Thanks, Gia. All right, so the equity perspective here, I think the first thing to note is our definition of equity. So we have the kind of traditional definition here of equity being kind of making sure that the disadvantaged communities kind of get the benefits, the positive benefits of having kind of freight electrification along routes in their area. But we've also widened the definition of equity here to also include an emphasis on access for small fleets and independent operators to public charging networks. So in this way, it also overlaps with the policy perspective, right? So making sure that we address those gap sites, which are needed in order for these smaller fleets and independent operators to be able to electrify. But in the example that we have on this slide, we are focusing on the kind of traditional definition centered around kind of benefits to disadvantaged communities. Also, this perspective is definitely heavily reliant on the feedback that we received from the CTAC, which is the Community Technical Advisory Committee, that was also formed as part of the eTruck project. And so kind of taking into account the major kind of community-focused needs and concerns that we kind of heard back from the CTAC, which have been included here into the methodology for the equity perspective. So one of those, for example, being kind of a concern around rerouting these truck routes into residential areas, even though they are considered disadvantaged communities, especially if there are, for example, additional financial incentives to build these stations within disadvantaged communities. So there's a strong emphasis there on making sure to keep these stations within 1 mile of the freeway exit, for example, or kind of keeping them on existing truck routes near current truck stops is a good indicator also of kind of existing areas for trucks to stop. And so in most public agencies, regional public agencies would have internal data on land use. So in this case, we have partnered with the SCAG region. So we're able to use their land use data for some of these analysis. So what you're seeing here, for example, on this map to the right, is the land use data collected through SCAG, where we were able to then focus on land use around or defined as industrial and warehousing as priority areas or recommended priority areas for a station. We've also included there in this map the cycle lanes of the area. So here we're looking at an area around Ontario, California. So this is an area that we as a project team know well, as there is the eTruck pilot site in this area, as an example of kind of layers of information to take into account in the equity prioritization perspective. Right. I
great.
know we are on.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we can breeze through these next slides. Actually, I think yeah, that's fine. We can skip this slide.
Great. And I just want to wrap up with the phase two part of this project. As you can tell, we're kind of getting towards the latter stages of the phase one. There was a phase two identified. We're going to have a CPR meeting targeted for Q2 of 2026, and we expect to start discussions over what the phase two part looks like. But I guess the key message I want to send is that like a lot of the concepts are going to be shaped by lessons learned, and we really want to make sure we're aligned with the relevant CPUC proceedings. So in the next slide there, I started to identify some of these key CPUC activities, and wanted to put those out there from the transportation electrification policy and infrastructure. So that's the statewide TE planning framework, the timely energization of electric vehicle charging. That's the timelines. The high DER proceeding has the pending electrification work in there, and then these prior TE framework work there. But I did want to give Emily a moment here to comment on some of these things, you know, as we proceed forward there, because she's in the middle of these things, and is there anything you would want to add based on, you know, above and beyond my very rudimentary introduction of these things, and I totally apologize. We ran over time on things, so we didn't leave enough time for this discussion here. But I don't know, Emily, if you wanted to comment on any of these the work going on here and current priorities.
Yeah, I can provide a few quick comments on this. I think a lot of the other folks at state agencies have probably heard, you know, what we're doing on this and a few others on this call. So I don't want to belabor it too much. There's not much more I can say on the TEPI work at this time. I think we're, you know, currently working on some deliberative things with that. You know, we issued a ruling with our TE proactive planning framework focused on corridors. In October of last year, but nothing I can share at this time on that work. On the energization proceeding, I do want to highlight we have a proposed decision currently out on I'm blanking on the word
The
flexible service
yeah.
connections. Yeah. So that is something that I think is interesting to think about how this interfaces with all of this work, just in terms of, you know, if capacity at certain locations is, you know, more fluid or less binary, I think, than it maybe has been in the past, where IOUs have, you know, told people that they could either move forward with the project or not. I think that does maybe complicate to a degree the extent that we're understanding capacity in certain locations. But yeah, I think we're expecting a decision to go, or assuming the commission votes on it, probably that will come out later this month, or I'm sorry, later next month of February. High DER, yeah, I think we have pending loads and scenario planning frameworks, I think are, you know, very much connected with all of this. And I think now that we have those frameworks in place, it'll, you know, be a lot of learning of how those are operationalized during our upcoming planning cycles. Yeah, I think that's kind of all I have to share on this at this time.
No.
But
yeah, and just, you know, like, just know, Emily, that, you know, you know, folks have been just telling us, you know, make sure you connect with the CPUC, and you know, anyway, so we
for
really
sure,
appreciate
yeah,
really appreciate you stepping in, and sorry we didn't leave you enough time there at the end here. So
no
um
worries. Yeah.
and just to wrap up, we have a couple, and I won't spend any time on this. You can see in the slide, the tracks we're talking about for the phase two part, and then I'll turn it over to Gia or Lisa to wrap up there.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining and staying a minute after. If you have any additional feedback, please email Liz. Her email is on the screen, but we'll also send you a summary email with meeting notes and meeting slides. And if you have any additional questions or considerations that you think of offline, we're always happy to receive that feedback. But thank you very much for your time today and happy 2026. And we look forward to staying connected with you.
Great. Thanks, everybody, and appreciate all the comments. That's super helpful. So.